I am David Ebe. I am an attorney at Boyce Law Firm in Sioux Falls. My colleague Jason Sutton, who I am filling in for today, is the chair of the State Bar of South Dakota CLE committee. Unfortunately, had unexpected matter come up, so he asked me to fill in, and I'm happy to do so. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items. And give a PSA as well, but go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. First off, the PSA, do you or another State Bar member or law student you know have a drug or alcohol problem or struggle with depression or anxiety? Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers is a confidential and independent resource for South Dakota lawyers, law students, and their families. Your referral or visit with Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers is strictly confidential and privileged. Call Becky Porter for more information at 605-391-5191. Becky is a Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers member, and your communications with her are likewise confidential and privileged. You can also call 988 to reach a mental health professional or the Sand Creek Employee Assistance Program at their confidential crisis telephone line 1-888-243-5744. Mental health professionals at both numbers are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now to move on regarding today's program. Some details on the program. Today's presentation will last approximately 1 hour. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the chat feature of Zoom. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Also, thank you to the State Bar of South Dakota and CLE Inc. for their support of today's program. And I would now like to introduce the presenters. First, Sharon Shantos is of Sage Project Consultants, and she was the South Dakota Civil Legal Needs Assessment Lead Evaluator. Ms. Shantos has a Bachelor's of Science in Chemical Engineering from South Dakota School of Mines and Technology and completed her Master of Arts in Program Evaluation from Michigan State University. She has over 15 years of evaluation, grant management, strategic planning, and consulting experience. Our next presenter will be Leah Robluski. She is the current executive director of East River Legal Services. Leah received a Bachelor's of Arts in Philosophy from the University of Nebraska, Omaha in 1993, and her Juris Doctorate from Creighton University School of Law in 1996. Leah started her legal aid career as a staff attorney for Western Nebraska Legal Services, which served 56 rural counties. She still misses those days driving for miles to a small town courthouse to represent grateful clients. After 25 years as an attorney at Legal Aid in Nebraska, Leah moved to Sioux Falls in May of 2022 to lead East River Legal Services. She is grateful for the statewide legal needs assessment and can't imagine a better guide to improve access to courts. But Leah believes in the rule of law, strives to practice what she preaches, and has fallen pretty hard for the state of South Dakota. Our next presenter is Denise Langley, and she is the coordinator of Access to Justice. Denise has held the position since October of 2016. Access to Justice is a legal aid program developed by the State Bar of South Dakota and provides pro bono and reduced rate legal assistance to income qualifying individuals from across the state. Prior to working with Access to Justice, Denise was employed as a tribal court public defender for 4 years. She also spent time as both a staff attorney and managing attorney for Dakota Plains Legal Services. Denise is originally from Pierre, South Dakota. And after spending time on the East Coast and almost a year in France, Denise returned to South Dakota, where she completed her undergraduate studies at the University of South Dakota, obtaining a BS in criminal justice and psychology in 2001. Denise received her JD from the University of South Dakota School of Law in 2004, and Denise also previously served in the South Dakota Army National Guard. And for our final presenter, Kylie Mantee, she is a staff attorney in the Fort Thompson office of Dakota Plains Legal Services. She has been with Dakota Plains Legal Services since November of 2021, and her legal career has been working in legal aid in Minnesota and South Dakota. So we'll start with our first presenter.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sharon. I was really happy to be selected to do this legal needs assessment. It's bar none one of the first or best projects I've ever worked on. The first thing that I wanted to just kind of level set with everybody on the call is how we went about doing this needs assessment. When we designed the needs assessment, we were informed by other state legal needs assessments and borrowed those tools, but then we adjusted those tools for South Dakota. So really the first thing that I wanted to show you is one of the work products that came out of this was community interview infographics, and then there's a detailed report that's on the South Dakota Law Help website. But one of the things that we did is we went to 21 communities and interviewed people in domestic violence shelters, welfare offices. I went to veterans offices, anywhere where there were people that were the target audience for legal aid in South Dakota. And based on that, we developed some top legal needs for each of the 21 communities. And what I would encourage anybody who's on this call, who's from one of those 21 communities, and you can see those in the report, is that you can use this data to write grant applications or work collaboratively in your community to address those gaps. So I would really encourage you to do that. So that, for those communities that had quite a few surveys, I also put the survey results in there as well. And the next work product that came out of this, again, that you can find on the website, is the demographics and how that matches. So this is for Brown County. The previous slide was for Aberdeen, South Dakota. So you can also look at your county infographics, and we have an infographic for each one of the counties in South Dakota on what their demographics were per the 2020 US Census. And then we matched that with the legal aid that was provided by A2J, DPLS, and ERLS. And I kind of like to look at Brown County because all three legal aid organizations provided services to people in that county. And then we look at who was served, and then we look at what types of cases did they do. So we usually capture the top 3 to 4 cases on each of the county infographics. And then we looked at, between 2018 and 2021, how many people per 1,000 people were served in this particular county. So between 2018 and 2021, legal aid served between 1 and 3 people per 1,000 people in Brown County. And this was pretty, overall in the state, this was pretty typical. The state average was 3.3 people that were served by legal aid. So by Access to Justice, East River, and Dakota Plains. And not surprisingly, the counties that had the higher rates were where offices were that had smaller populations, where Dakota Plains is at, like, for example, Todd County, Dewey County, and other places like Roberts County, etc. So that, if you want to look at things like, or you want to see the work products, and again, use it in the grant application, use it for community strategic planning, or even looking at this for your own firm, this would be a good place to start. And if you want more details, again, please look at the detailed reports for more information. And then the final three things that we looked at was the Pro Se data. I talked to a lot of UJS court clerks and judges. The court clerks were just fantastic in providing information. And then we also looked at policies, like nationwide policies that are best practices, and I pulled that into a report. And then the final report that I pulled together for this project was I interviewed many private attorneys across the state of South Dakota to get their feedback on their views on working on pro se cases or working alongside Access to Justice, East River, or Dakota Plains Legal Services to provide their services. In that report, the barriers to doing pro bono and the benefits to doing pro bono work is also included in there. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lee.
Lee, you're muted.
The bottom left corner, there should be an unmute button if you move your mouse.
It's not working.
All right.
Here, I'll call Kylie at the office. She's on as well.
I
Meanwhile,
apologize. I am not, I think I had like presenter view up. So let me, now I am unmuted. I apologize. So after the Sharon finished her meetings and completed the summary, there were multiple meetings where we met to discuss the recommendations and get input from others. So I will share this again. So Denise and Kylie and I are going to jointly present this portion concerning the joint recommendations, and then there are also program specific recommendations. So the three programs share SD Law Help as the place where our applications all begin. And when looking at the website, it was very clear that part of the confusion with clients has to do with their access to that website. There was not a distinction between the three legal aid programs, and there's not a clear explanation of the intake process. So this project is being led by East River Legal Services. We maintain sdlawhelp.org. I've been meeting regularly with Tom and Denise and Anne-Marie at Dakota Plains to share proposed changes to the website. This is going to be an ongoing project throughout the year. The first thing we did was to clarify the three programs. We'll next be clarifying the different intake programs as well. And I can take the next budget too. So one of the requests from the clerks was a handout that could be given to individuals who come to the courthouse looking for assistance in civil matters. And so if there was a pro bono card that was developed for the State Bar Association that distinguishes the three legal aid programs. One of the pieces of feedback we got was just general confusion about why there are three legal aid programs and what the difference is. So we're going to be working on a handout similar to the pro bono distinction that distinguishes the three programs for clients that will be available at the courthouses.
The next joint recommendation indicates that the three programs should consider maintaining a future advisory council composed of Access to Justice, Dakota Plains Legal Services, East River Legal Services representatives, courts and community agencies that can continuously improve the legal aid process and services in South Dakota. As part of this statewide legal needs assessment, we had an advisory council that we met with periodically to obtain feedback throughout the legal needs assessment process. And as we worked through the assessment, this recommendation came that the 3 programs should consider maintaining an advisory council throughout the future. So that is something that we are looking at doing as well.
And the next bullet point talks about all of us coordinating to get more involvement and recruitment of attorneys to take on a wide array of cases that come up across South Dakota with people that would be eligible for our services, but we just don't have the staff to take them. And we need the state's help and the attorneys across the state to help us to provide that access to courts that if you have more money, you have access to.
And I can add a little bit on to that part as well. I think Lee will probably chime in terms of the postcards that we had at the State Bar Convention this year that were developed as part of that recommendation. What I would like to mention is that the 3 programs all have different ways that private attorneys in South Dakota can volunteer or become involved through each legal aid program. For instance, Access to Justice relies on attorneys that volunteer for not just pro bono cases, but we also have reduced rate cases, 2 different kinds. One is the Modest Means program, where attorneys that volunteer for those cases agree to charge at the reduced modest means rate. For the current year, it is set at $107 an hour, and the clients still remain responsible for any related legal expenses such as court filing fees, service of process fees, unless they're waived, of course. If there's court-ordered mediation or custody evaluations, those are all the client's responsibility. And then we also have Judicare cases, which are a reduced rate case program, where our program provides a modest stipend to the volunteer attorney. Typically, the Judicare cases involve family law or custody matters that are more difficult to place due to the fact that they involve custody or they're in a more rural area where there are not a lot of attorneys. Oftentimes, we may also use that Judicare funding to cover mileage expenses for attorneys that volunteer on a pro bono basis, but because there's travel involved, we want to make sure we can at least cover their mileage because they're volunteering on a pro bono basis. And then East River Legal Services has its own options for attorneys to become involved. I know they're working on hosting pro se clinics where attorneys can volunteer for a small, like 2-hour slot, for example. Access to Justice Dakota Plains are also looking into those options. And then Dakota Plains also has their PAI program that attorneys can sign up for, which is another reduced rate type of program.
And there are, at the end, we'll talk more about how the private bar can get involved and support the program. So we'll go a little more into depth in that, but thank you, Denise. Yeah. And then the last recommendation on this slide, there's because Dakota Plains and East River have different service areas, there are sometimes overlap between clients with issues in different, in a county that's outside their service area. And in the northeast corner, of course, we're East River, so that's our service area, but there are a couple counties up in the northeast corner that we coordinate services for with Dakota Plains. And then further recommendations. And I'm happy to lead this off. One thing we talked about with the state bar in particular at the has to do with the professional rules regarding limited scope. If you look at the needs assessment, you'll see in some counties more than 90% of people are representing themselves in domestic cases. We know that nationally that is common, and in South Dakota we found that to be the case as well. So what we're looking for are ways to help pro se litigants access the courts and be successful in representing themselves, and oftentimes that requires a little bit of assistance. And then we also are recommending that some sort of incentive for providing services for pro bono cases.
Can we switch to the next slide for the second list of the joint recommendations? But
That's
I
fine.
can take the next one. So the next joint recommendation on the list was for the 3 programs to continue to advocate for general fund appropriations through the Commission on Equal Access to the Courts, also known as the CEAC, because those funds are then passed to the legal services programs. And those funds have been very important to the programs, and they have steadily increased. Just this past year, we had a big increase in funding that the 3 I want to say it's 5 times the amount that we're normally used to. So the 3 programs are already in the process of discussing the best way to utilize that large increase in funds. And then, of course, we have to continue to advocate for continued funding in the future.
And then the next one that we have in the joint is to explore ways to communicate with social service agencies to help refer individuals to legal aid. So getting our information out to all the places where people are applying for benefits and needing our help. There's a lot of cross clients that are seeking social services in different areas that also have domestic violence, custody, mental health, all those issues that come up as well.
Next, the joint recommendation to educate and promote careers in the legal professions that don't require a law license. And unfortunately, there are just not enough lawyers available. Even if we had the funds to hire them, there are not enough lawyers to meet the civil legal need that we are seeing in South Dakota. So there are, in tribal courts, for example, there are alternatives to represent clients that don't require a law license. At East River Legal Services, we've added a benefits advocate who's able to represent clients at Social Security without a law office or a law degree or license. And we also utilize victim advocates to provide support for clients and connect them with services to help them be more successful. But again, it doesn't require a law license.
And the last joint recommendation is for the programs to look at partnering with the USD Knutson School of Law Works program for law students to provide legal services to individuals under the supervision of an attorney or a faculty member. During the legal needs assessment process, there was a lot of positive feedback regarding the Works program. That's something that attorney Marilyn Treves is in charge of and involved with through the law school. And her students work on assisting individuals that are filling out forms on a pro se basis. I believe there's also the option for mediation assistance if parties need a mediator regarding a family law matter such as custody. And that program has been in existence for, I want to say, about 6 years, maybe 7. But it has a lot of positive feedback and provides an opportunity that would benefit both the legal aid programs and the law students and the Works program itself in terms of partnership opportunities in the future.
And then each of the programs had their own recommendations, so we'll present those each separately, and starting with access to justice.
All right, so access to justice, for those of you that are not familiar with the program, we are a small legal aid program that was created by the State Bar in 2005. The hope was that we could pick up some of the overflow of clients that were not able to be served through either Dakota Plains or East River Legal Services due to a conflict of interest, or there just not being enough attorneys to handle all of the applicants that are coming in. And so the program has been in existence for about 18 years now. It used to be strictly a pro bono volunteer program. We have since expanded the program to have the modest means reduced rate option, and then of course the Judicare funding, which provides the modest stipends. In our recommendations, the first one was to have access to justice, look at opportunities to host pro se clinics in specific areas with the attorneys that volunteer through our program. And that is something that Access to Justice would like to look at partnering with both East River Legal Services and Dakota Plains Legal Services to consider hosting pro se clinics in different areas throughout the state of South Dakota. Our second recommendation was to consider adopting an attorney workforce survey that would be administered concurrently with the annual registration process through the State Bar Association. Questions could include things such as attorneys' interest level in volunteering, whether or not they practice in tribal courts in South Dakota, attorneys' practice areas, and their areas of interest in terms of volunteering. And that is something that we would like to see be developed over this next year so that it can be included, if not during this next registration process, at least by the following year.
Denise, I am sorry to interrupt. Lee, can you advance the slide to access to justice?
I apologize. I was not prepared to be the moderator today, and Zoom is not my usual online.
You know what?
I thought I was. That's why I'm so confused. I apologize.
No problem.
It's okay. We appreciate you guys stepping in here, Lee.
It's all good. Just let me know if I don't have the right slide up.
Our third recommendation was to look at ways to market access to justice to our private attorneys so that we can teach them more about the program, how they can sign up to volunteer through the program, and how the program works. One of the ways we have already kind of stepped into that recommendation is through postcards that Lee with East River developed for use at the annual convention. I know we're going to go over that a little bit later, so I won't elaborate too much on that, but we have started that process already. The next recommendation was for Access to Justice to look at marketing options for prospective clients through agencies that serve them, such as courthouses and other nonprofit organizations. Again, we've kind of touched on this earlier, but we're looking at developing print cards for our courthouses to distinguish each program and the differences between each program and how an individual can apply for legal services through each program. And then the last recommendation for Access to Justice was to consider the potential for additional staffing to support the Access to Justice program. We currently run on a very slim budget. So it's something to consider in the future, because that if we can increase our budget to at least bring on another staff member, that can open the door to potentially serving more clients down the road.
Thanks, Denise. And then we have Dakota Plains. You have 2 slides, Kylie.
So Dakota Plains, we are looking to create the brief instructional PDF or video on the website for new employees and referral community partners and courthouses. So everyone can know how to refer to DPLS and how to get the clients to us. It was recommended that we also attend community partner meetings and help market and get Dakota Plains out into the communities that we are a part of, and develop a way to maintain those community relationships. With Dakota Plains in particular, the tribal governments can change over a lot, and that can change a lot of how DPLS is perceived within the tribal community. So we want to make sure to maintain and develop strong relationships, not just within our tribes that we work on, but also within the other communities. Rapid City in particular is working a lot and doing a lot more outreach to get out into Butte counties and Meade counties to reach out to get more people there, as they are heavily in Rapid City. So they're trying to expand their work area by doing some outreach in those counties. We're also into considering holding divorce pro se clinics, and as well as improving our intake process. You've heard about that from as a general for everybody. That is also a process here in Dakota Plains to make sure that we can get a quick turnaround and make sure we get that help out there as quickly as possible. And another thing too, Tom had recently took a trip to go see in Minnesota what they have called justice buses. And so Tom recently went there and visited them, saw them in person, and appears he's very wanting to move forward and try to get a justice bus for Dakota Plains so that we can get out into those more rural areas. A justice bus is essentially, it's a van, an office on wheels. It'll have Wi-Fi, computer, printer, all the things there so that we can get out into the communities that need us and don't necessarily have the transportation and other aspects. So that is something that Tom has taken a liking to, and hopefully we'll see some movement in that process here in the next couple of years. All right, I think I can go to the next slide.
Okay.
Excuse me. Yep, and then we are also, Dakota Plains is also working with getting more stuff with the works clinics and trying to get clients referred to them. We want to further develop a process with the domestic violence shelters in our service area and partner with them so that we can have a stronger representation there and help more there. We have a market program that's outlined in our strategic plan that includes a lot of the outreach that I've kind of talked about here too, of getting out into those areas, working. The justice bus is kind of a new one there. Otherwise, just getting out to the different areas in our service area with different pamphlets and information on how to get a hold of us. And then we're also considering training paralegals in our program to be guardian ad litems and to work within the tribal courts for those guardian ad litems. Right, I think if I'm remembering right, a lot of what was wanted and needed on tribal lands was to do with kids, and guardian ad litems would be huge there to help those kids and those items go through. And that would also be helpful for us attorneys to have the paralegals be able to provide some more assistance in those aspects at Dakota Plains, and then improve communication with clients via text messages and phone messages. That's the communication barrier is huge in the tribal, especially in the Native American areas. So finding various ways to better communicate with our clientele is something that we vastly and want to achieve.
Thanks, Kylie. So at ERLS, one of the first things we did in response to the needs assessment, it was actually before Sharon was done, over and over when she met with community partners, we heard about the need to help clients access the benefits that they're entitled to. So we created a benefit specialist position, which is an advocate who helps clients apply for benefits, appeal denials, and we've also found it helpful. We actually had a domestic violence victim whose payee was her abuser. So the benefits advocate was able to help in a domestic violence case as well. So we've really found this addition helpful to our office and to our clients. We actually are having a second staff train to be able to work in this area, because we've found not only is there a great need, but it just works, it partners really well with the other advocacy that we're doing. We also created a housing specialist. This was a position that was created during the COVID pandemic, and it was actually, we hosted the position. The person was a staff person of ERLS's, but the project was kind of a little bit separate. It was an unusual arrangement, as a lot of things were at that time in our country. So we have made the decision to make that a permanent position at East River. So the funding for that position ended, and we have absorbed it into our program, and now provide the financial assistance comes from our program. That person is a staff person and they are here permanently. That individual tries to get involved before individuals are facing homelessness. So she will work with issues between landlords and tenants, help tenants access any benefits that they might be eligible for. And if she needs to, it can be referred to an attorney for legal assistance. We are working on improving our intake process. A big part of that, as has been mentioned, is just managing expectations. Every single person that calls our office and fills out an SD Law Help application expects and wants to have an attorney. I wish that they could, and they're just not, it's very few clients actually who receive a direct representative who can go to court with them. We get as many as 200 applications a month, and processing those applications and then assigning them to attorneys means that we have to identify priorities for different levels of service. So that's something that we're going to work on communicating better at the SD Law Help website, and also when our intake is speaking with clients. We also are working on a brief instructional PDF or video concerning community partners and courthouses, so that people know who to refer to ERLS and how to do so. And then attending community partners meetings to further market ERLS. We have several client advocates who specifically work on creating community partners. We have added the legal staff to be included in this as well. One of the things that we did recently was a webinar for the domestic violence shelters in our area, so that we could educate them on our intake process and help them understand the process, so that they can help the clients have a realistic idea about how to access our services and what that's going to look like. We also do have a back door for shelters so that they can get applications to us more quickly with releases, so that we're able to quickly respond to cases that need that type of an attention. We are working on creating marketing messages that are transparent about eligibility and the types of cases that are accepted and how intake works. one of the things we're working on with SD Law Help right now is just a frequently asked questions section. You know, why can't I pick what program my case goes to? Why did you turn my case down? The questions that we hear over and over and over can be put into an easy question and answer format. And we're hoping that giving that information to clients up front will help. We do partner with the Works Clinic and refer clients to them. We are big fans. We actually invited Marilyn to come and meet with our intake staff so that we could get to know each other better and understand what we each do. We have started, as has been referenced already, we have twice a month a Pro Se clinic at East River. So on the first and third Thursday of the month from 6 to 8 p.m., we have pre-screened clients that need help with Pro Se forms. So these are clients who have applied to East River and qualify for services, but they are not eligible to have an attorney to represent them directly. So we give those clients the option of attending a Pro Se clinic where they are helped by a licensed attorney or a law student complete the forms to go to the courthouse. They're able to answer any questions and give advice. And we have had great success in every way with this. The clients have been very grateful. And we've had a much easier time finding attorney volunteers. So we are continuing to expand the Pro Se pro bono clinic model because it is a very cost-effective way to provide assistance to clients. We have great forms through the UJS, and the courts are very accommodating to Pro Se people, but there's only so much that those parties can do to help a Pro Se litigant. And often they have questions that they just need help with. Service is over and over and over the biggest barrier we have found to Pro Se people being successful. You know, you have to get that other party served or you're not going to be able to go forward. And so we have just found that Pro Se clients really need a little extra help. And so having those clinics has made a big difference. We have 3 bilingual staff people that work in our forms clinic, not all at once, but we do always try and make sure to have a Spanish speaking staff person. And then we use Language Line to provide interpretation for any other Pro Se client. So although we are one of the problems with an ESL client and the Works Clinic is that the client is required to provide their own interpreter. So one of the groups of people that were able to help at the ERLS clinics would be individuals that do not have English as their first language. And then lastly, which I have already referenced, we created a process for domestic violence shelters to send us their applications by email with a release so that we can quickly get moving on protection orders. We have found the hearings in some of those cases are set just within days. And so we need to be able to respond quickly. And the shelters have really appreciated having that additional backdoor is what we call it. So the next slide, Sharon, have to do with your findings. And I think we decided not to go through those. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
These are included in the slideshow, which I believe is going to be sent to all of the participants. Is that correct?
I know there is a link to the materials for today's Law for Lunch presentation on the State Bar website. So that would be where participants in today's program should be able to access these materials.
Super. So Sharon, is there a spot you want me to pick back up?
No, I think that, I mean, if anybody, we have 15 minutes left, and if anybody has any specific questions, we can answer those, or you can go through the last few slides.
Sure. I added these at the end. I mean, we're hoping that after hearing about the need for assistance in the state and the things that our programs are doing that you are thinking to yourself, what can I do to help? And so we have, as we've said, there are 3 programs. One of the responses that really resonated with me is, why do we need 3 pro bono programs? These programs are all different, and actually ERLS and Dakota Plains are required to have pro bono programs. We've tried to distinguish ourselves so that you can find a way to volunteer that works for you. So as I've mentioned, at East River, we are hosting a pro bono pro se clinic twice a month. It's a one-time 2-hour commitment. These are pro se clients, so you will not have to ever talk to that client again after you leave. If the client has ongoing issues, so if you send them out with to get a summons, and for whatever reason the sheriff can't serve their partner, that client will recontact East River Legal Services, and we will follow up with that client and help them with an alternate method of service. We pre-screen the client to make sure that it's appropriate for pro se. So, no strange issues are going to show up that would make it difficult for pro se. And we have support staff that are available at every clinic. We had a student who was at every clinic this summer, and then starting in the fall, we'll have already heard students that will be attending the clinics, both to help the clients, but also as support for the attorneys. But we provide notaries to notarize and make copies of all the documents. And we're really just asking the attorney there to be support as the client fills out the pro se forms. And Dakota Plains.
So Dakota Plains are, sorry, that mute button. We are working to expand some of our pro bono services. It's really needed out here especially in the rural areas. So we do have some small payment that we can put forward to your cases. You get to choose your case. The client will usually approach you. And then there's the contract that you would handle with Anne Marie currently. And it's pretty, you get to choose how you want to receive payments, and we have no limit on the number of cases that you can take. I have had a couple cases that actually have come to me where they have worked with an attorney for a little bit on what they could afford, and then the attorney recommended them to apply to our services and ask for this program. And Tom has been on board with letting those attorneys continue their cases while being pro bono, part of our PAI program at Dakota Plains. So if that is something that would work for you guys too, that is always something to reference to clients as well, going forward.
Thanks, Kylie. And then Denise.
Okay, so with Access to Justice, we provide options for pro bono direct representation, modest means, which is the reduced rate direct representation, or Judicare reduced rate direct representation. Access to Justice pre-screens the clients, and we make sure that they are income eligible for one of those programs. And it is Access to Justice, typically myself, that contacts attorney volunteers directly. So we don't have the clients contact the attorney until we have spoken with the attorney. I provide a brief synopsis of the case and conflict check information regarding the parties on the case. And that way the attorney has time to run their own conflict check, review information about the case. They can pull up anything that's already been filed on e-courts in the past. And then if that attorney indicates to me that they do want to accept that case or meet with the client first before making a final determination, it is only at that point that I will make the referral for the client to the attorney. And when I do that, I provide an attorney referral letter that provides that client with the attorney's name and their office contact information. and instructions how to contact that attorney to schedule their initial appointment. And then I provide the client with that, and the attorney also gets a copy of that. If the attorney has questions during their case, they can always make contact with the Access to Justice office. Access to Justice provides potential attorney volunteers with the, well, I guess I already went over that. Whoops. And our office, whoops, I missed the last one. Oh, yeah. Okay. So I was just speaking and did not look over those, but I covered everything right there.
Yep, I think you got it, Denise. So that is all we have. Sharon's contact is here on the slideshow. I would suggest, if you want to learn more, sdlawhelp.org is the website for the 3 programs where you can apply for services, but you'll also see there are some short descriptions of the 3 programs with links that take you directly to their program's website.
And please feel free to reach out to any one of the programs, or Kylie or Lee or myself if you have questions about our programs or volunteer opportunities through each of the programs. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Sharon, Lee, Denise, and Kylie, for incredibly informative presentation. I have a prompt here. We're supposed to take questions from the chat. I don't see any. I did have a couple questions. In terms of the biggest obstacle you see, and I don't care which one of you takes this question, the biggest obstacle you see in the individuals who are in need of these services, whether that be based on your presentation, not knowing the services exist, the application process, them not maybe qualifying, or not enough attorneys to assist the people that do qualify. Is there one area of need that you feel like is the biggest obstacle?
Lee, can you go back up to that one slide where it had barriers, and then you guys. Oh, I'm sorry, it's down, sorry.
No, you're okay. Oh, right here.
Yeah. So that was asked to the survey participants, and a lot of people just didn't even know that there was legal aid. And a surprising number either couldn't use, and this was validated by the court clerks, that they didn't have a computer or were not able to use because of a disability. They didn't, they could not use the computer due to dexterity issues or blindness, whatever. And then, as Kylie said, there's, especially on the western side of the state, there's a real communication barrier to communication via cell phone or other things. But Lee and Kylie, you guys probably have on the ground, have more experience on this.
I think my first answer was a little different than these barriers to legal aid. I think that we're asking a lot of the legal profession, given the vast numbers of people that need legal advice. Limiting it to people that have a law license makes this even more difficult than I think it needs to be. So, the clerk's office, for example, cannot even tell you when your answer's due. So if I walk in and say I was served with this lawsuit, when is my answer due? The clerk can't give you even really basic advice. So I think that leads to a lot of frustration. And I think that has to be part of the solution to this, is knowing when having a law license is needed and when we are just putting more barriers in front of people that cannot afford a lawyer. And we're causing harm. I understand that the reason for the protection of the legal profession and the necessity of a license is to protect clients. But the individuals that we're talking about can't afford a lawyer, and we're harming them by having such restrictions on who can give information and advice to people who can't afford a lawyer. They're being harmed by being protected, I guess, is one way to think of it, which is something that I really took away from this report by Sharon.
I would chime in just to say that I think through this process, we have discovered that there is a lot of confusion amongst the private bar, individual attorneys, solo practitioners, firms, and larger firms between the 3 legal aid programs, what we do. And I think there's a lack of understanding in how underserved so many people are, that there are just not enough resources even between our 3 legal aid programs to serve everyone that applies. And, I'm sure all of us have been asked at one time or another, well, we referred them to your program, but in reality, they were the 47th application for a family law case in Pierre, South Dakota this month. And there's only 5 attorneys in this area that handle family law, and only 3 of them volunteer through the program. So just trying to get that information out there so that our private bar understands how limited our programs really are. And even if each of our programs were given 5 more attorneys, we wouldn't even be able to make a dent in what the true need is in our state for civil legal assistance.
We're trying to spread 400 applications for help a month between these 3 programs. And so as Denise said, it's disappointing when we talk about our programs and someone says, well, I sent someone there and you didn't help them. I think we need to start really examining why that's happening.
I would say too that going from different legal services, especially at Dakota Plains, I feel like there's also a higher level of conflict of interest because so many of the people are especially when it comes to kids. So Dakota Plains gets conflicted out of so many cases because they're living with grandma, aunt, and they're all part of the abuse and neglect case. So then once we represent one of them, then we're conflicted out for so many other cases that come forward too. So I see that as more of a Dakota Plains one because the environment and culture is a little bit different on the reservations, but I've seen that so much and people get so frustrated that why is everything a conflict? That comes up on, so just speaking in terms of what I'm seeing as a huge barrier here on the reservations is that's a huge factor that varies a little bit from the other 2.
We've had a question pop up and there's only less than 2 minutes left, so I don't know if the meeting's going to automatically close. It's regarding training resources for attorneys that are either younger or have went from a specific practice area to a more general practice area. I know the state bar has a mentorship program. In addition to that, I believe a lot of the CLE materials from the past are accessible on the state bar website. If you are trying to get to those and you're having problem accessing them or information about that mentorship program, I would contact the state bar office. Aside from that, Lee or Kylie or David, do you have any other recommendations for individuals that are looking to get more information on some of these common issues like eviction law, paternity, etc.?
Yeah, please. I know Denise and I have talked about bankruptcy was a practice area that came up over and over with a huge need, which I think is very appropriate for new lawyers. And Denise and I have talked about providing training to private attorneys and then having access to justice, place pro bono cases with those private attorneys with mentorship provided by East River attorneys who are working on consumer bankruptcies. So if their family law is about half of the applications that come in, those are challenging cases to handle in any direction. And I don't know what the solution is to that. We ask our courts to do a lot. The cases that Kylie is referencing, those are very complicated emotional cases, and we're asking the courts to do things that historically we have not relied on the courts to do. Evictions, debt collection, family law cases, the number of case filings and legal issues in those areas historically is higher than it's ever been. So responding to those needs, I think, is really challenging. I don't know if anyone has ideas on family law. I know that's Denise's biggest area of most difficult case to place. Denise, is that fair?
Yes, and I just sent a message out on the chat. We have had some of our newer attorneys volunteer for family law cases, for example, and they haven't, maybe they've handled a uncontested divorce, but now they want to volunteer for a contested divorce and custody matter. And so I've matched them with an experienced family law attorney to kind of mentor them through that case.
Yeah, I would say that's going to be the best way, in my experience in South Dakota, is to find someone to be your mentor, to work with you and guide you through there. I started out in Minnesota and they had different programs there, but CLEs are not required in South Dakota. So different programs are built differently. I would say if you're wanting that knowledge and expertise to help you and guide you through, find a strong mentor.
And I'd add, if you have a specific, if you run into an issue in a specific area where you have a specific question, the state bar in South Dakota, most members are extremely welcoming. I mean, if I got a call or Jason Sutton got a call, we'd certainly help you. And we have a firm, and there's other firms in South Dakota and in Sioux Falls that basically practice in every area, have somebody in our office who practice in every area. And I know we'd be happy to get you an answer. And there's also a listserv through USD where people pose questions. So if you have a specific question, multiple more gray-haired attorneys, I will say, have told me, call the older attorney and ask them. You'll find that in most instances, and in my experience, they're happy to help and appreciate the younger generation kind of asking those questions. I had one other question, and I know we're over time, so I'll try to keep it short. Is there any experience requirements in terms of attorneys? Will you take attorneys, fresh out of law school, young associates? I mean, is there?
I think it depends on what we're asking them to do. I can, at the pro se clinic, I will tell you, we have an attorney who does personal injury, and he told me I would never have agreed to take a pro bono divorce, but coming to help someone fill out their pro se divorce forms is within his skill set. And so he's learning about family law. But I think that's very different than Denise trying to place a contested case with someone without that, without a family law background.
Right. And most attorneys, if they're not in that area, are very timid about stepping into it. And if they do, I would often, even if they don't mention it, recommend that they be matched with a mentor. Family law has changed a lot over the years. The child support calculations and deviations are different. There's often court-ordered mediation and custody evaluations involved. And so it's a lot more complex than it was even 10 years ago.
I think that's all the questions. Once again, thank you, Sharon, Lee, Denise, and Kylie. If those in attendance have any additional questions, please contact the State Bar at info@sdbar.net, and we will get them directed to our presenters. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate it if you would complete that and provide your feedback. On behalf of the State Bar of South Dakota, thank you for joining us and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.